It's amazing to see a lovely bunch of very young, energetic, passionate group of individuals looking forward to a beautiful future. So I thought that might as well I do my TED talk here about a relatable topic. Just as we spoke, imagine the amount of emails, the amount of video content, the amount of Facebook posts, the amount of snaps that one would send over just in the span of the last 60 seconds. That's right. Just in the span of the last 60 seconds, 231.4 million emails, 2.43 million snaps. For those of you who are using Snapchat, just in the span of the last 60 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, we're going to be talking about content and content generation today. Something that, being in the era of the kids who grew up with technology, were something that we are very familiar with. If you look at the spree of the growth of internet, just under the last 2 years, the contribution that we have had towards the entirety of content that holds within the internet, we have contributed 90%, 90% of the content from the start of the internet to date has been contributed within the last 2 years. Would you believe me? Within the last 2 years. This showcases the growth that we have had as a technology oriented generation to the creation of content. Now, while this moves on, over the years, what has happened is the responsibility and role of content generation, which was scaled and confined into a few different groups, such as probably a mass scale media station or a production house. Come with me, walk towards the early 2000s or the late 90s. When you look at the late 90s or the early 2000s, if you look at a video, the production of a video was a seriously strenuous task. But raise your hand. How many of you would know how to merge a video, how to split a video, how to crop a video, how to edit a video at the snap of a finger by the use of a simple mobile application that is on your phone? There you go. Almost each and every one of you. Way back in the day, editing a photograph was a seriously tedious task. Raise your hands. How many of you can edit a photograph by simply swiping left? There you go. Almost everyone. Over the years, what has happened is content generation has become so accessible and so common that what was once a task dedicated for a certain blue chip company is now a task for everyone. And with that, what necessarily happened, as much as it gave access to a lot of different people in terms to create content, each and every content creator started becoming each other's competitor. So naturally, if you're a person who is essentially an owner of a homemade YouTube channel, if you're a person who is essentially putting out a nice vlog about a beautiful vacation that you've just had, or if you're a person who is putting up a beautiful video of how to bake a cake, you are competing against the screen time of a big blue chip company such as Netflix. How does that work? Well, you are putting out content for the same set of users. Am I right? If somebody is going to watch your video for a period of 1 hour tonight, that is one less hour of that very same person consuming the content of a major scale blue chip streaming company. So with this kind of competition that went and moved on, people slowly started to forget that content and the creation of content, the activity of creating content, is indeed a very responsible and powerful task and activity. In 2002, if you recall, the first Spider-Man movie, just like Spider-Man was once told, with great power comes great responsibility. Why it came through and it was understood by almost all individuals that creating content was a very serious task that each and everyone should put in their heart and soul to, as well as remember that along with that, there comes a great responsibility to ensure that you do so in such a manner. Hence, responsible content creation has now become a serious topic that we need to talk about. Over the period of years and months, I presume, if my memory serves right, ideally after about 2017, along with content creation, brand oriented content and content that patronized brands became an industry. Along with that, people like myself was able to put together teams that can tell the stories of brands a little bit better, to tell the stories of brands in an authentic, relatable, and a very consumer oriented manner. And as a result, whenever you take your phone out and whenever you reach out to any of the social media platforms that you see up on your screen, you will see a lot of content that are produced by brands in order to ensure that their story is told in a proper manner. But when it comes down to content generation, irrespective of whether it is done with a commercial mindset or whether it is simply taking a beautiful snap of this wonderful event and posting it on your stories, or placing it up as a Facebook post, or the moment you came down here, checking in to the hotel and say, I'm here. Irrespective of the manner and the genre of content that you would create, it became increasingly important to be responsible about the type of content that you create. Where exactly are you going to post that piece of content, and exactly what do you intend of doing with it? In the early 2000s, at the time, the world's richest man, Bill Gates, once kept a statement which goes by the name of content is king. Over 2 decades, people mulled over it. People spoke that content is really, really, really important. But just around about 2020, for us marketers, we came up with a new novelty to understand that while content is king, context matters. It's no more about the content that you necessarily put out there, but it's also equally or even more important to understand where exactly are you going to place that content. And hence comes the discussion about knowledge versus information. Now, knowledge versus information, that sounds like a little bit of a complicated task, doesn't it? This is a debate that has been carried out by the greatest minds of all time. However, for me, when I come to think of it, for us to understand the difference between information and knowledge, It's a very simple thing for that matter. Let me give you an example. Information is knowing that tomato is a fruit. Knowledge is not putting it in the fruit salad. So it is equally important that you understand when you are producing content, you have a dire responsibility. And one would say, well, what responsibility do I have? I have 600 followers on Instagram. Most of them are from school. I have 700 friends on Facebook. Why do I have to be responsible about the content that I put out? No. Hence comes the importance of understanding and being knowledgeable at the content that you create. How do we become knowledgeable at the content that we create? Again, a very serious question that have been constantly asked and debated. When one is to be knowledgeable about the content that you create and be responsible in the process of creating such content, you should look at 5 pillars: the authenticity, the privacy of the people who are featured in the content that you generate, as well as yourself, the social impact, the empowerment impact, as well as the veracity or whether the facts that are mentioned within the content are indeed actually true. But is it always possible that you can actually create content that supports all of these pillars? Not quite. I had a friend of mine who's from Malaysia, and she is a big time content creator. I'm sure famous among most of you as well on Instagram. I noticed, however, that she had a practice. Whenever she would go to a place and she would put up a story, the story will always be 1 day later. For an example, if she would be here at this hotel with the kids and the husband, she would take up a snap but post it only 1 day later. Now, one could argue, well, isn't that destroying the whole authenticity pillar that you just spoke about? Yes, might be to a certain extent, because one would say you're supposed to be essentially posting it then and there. That's the whole story of a story. But when you're creating content, it is equally important to strike a balance. In this case, it was a balance between being authentic towards the follower base as well as opposed to creating and preserving the privacy for her and her family. Because a lot of people, she had a massive following on Instagram, and necessarily a lot of people would check out where she is from the stories and would just turn up there, intentionally or unintentionally, kind of scaring the kids. So she had to take a precaution method, and hence a 1 day later story, to strike a balance between privacy as well as the authentic aspect of the content you create. So, ladies and gentlemen, the digital media platforms that essentially allows you to create this sort of content also gives you a massive opportunity to empower different individuals. Now, while it is unfortunate that we sometimes have to hear certain stories where people would use technology that is at the tip of their fingers for quite adverse situations, we hear so much so stories almost all or every other day. But also, you have the sense of opportunity for you to use it for betterment. How many of you have seen the sticker that comes up on Instagram to support small businesses? There you go. Now, the real question is, how many of you have actually used it? That is questionable. Why would we not? Next time, when you go up on Instagram, and if your friend has a side hustle of baking absolutely delicious cakes, when was the last time that you gave them a shout out? When was the last time that you knew that your cousin is doing something absolutely amazing as an e commerce store, but you did not give them a shout out on Instagram? What is it going to cost you? Have you ever thought of it? While you create intentionally or unintentionally millions and millions of content pieces across the board, have you thought what sense of empowerment does my content have? If you go up on LinkedIn, generally a practice remains. If a person puts up a piece of content saying, I am open for work, people have a practice of coming and placing a comment saying, CFBR, commenting for better reach. I may not have a job to offer to the individual at the time, but I will generate a piece of content that would empower an individual to do better and to ensure that they have a better chance at finding what they're looking for. In the same manner, there are so many other technological advances that has happened, content that has been generated, that has moved better and positive prospects right across the world. Hence, if you realize, just like Odinson mentioned when he gave the Mjolnir to Thor, it is a tool to build and a weapon to destroy. The content that you create, as small as it may be, as big as it may be, it is a tool to build and a weapon to destroy. It can be used as a tool to build your friend's future. It can be used as a tool to nurture your friend's businesses. It can be a tool to ensure that your friend, your colleague, your neighbor feels better, as well as it can be a weapon that is intended at the most disastrous effects and consequences that will be known to mankind. So, the next time that you think of posting a piece of content, think twice. The next time before you swipe up on Tinder, the next time before you post a story on Instagram, the next time you send out a snap, the next time that you put out something on Facebook, think and think very carefully. Am I being a responsible content creator? While adding to the millions of such content that is created every 60 seconds, while adding to the millions and millions of content that goes around the world, am I being a knowledgeable person? Or am I putting the tomatoes in the fruit salad? Thank you very much.